Moving on to a few more extremely serious questions. There has been a major resonance in Ukraine, in Western countries, and naturally here as well, over Russia sharply increasing both the power and the frequency of its strikes on Kiev, other Ukrainian cities and ports. Based on your information, what are these strikes achieving? How effective are they, if at all? And are they having any impact on the overall situation along the line of contact?
Of course, these strikes are effective, they are timely, and they undoubtedly help our fighters. Our troops, our heroes at the front, accomplish the combat task before them. Why? Because it disrupts the enemy's ability to deliver equipment and ammunition, and to rotate personnel along the line of contact. It disrupts the capacity of defense industry enterprises to refine and upgrade weapons. Upgrades that occur with the direct participation, not just the support, but the direct involvement of Western sponsors. Naturally, this has a very direct and positive impact from the perspective of achieving military results on the conduct of hostilities.
Why did this escalation occur in the first place?
Well, speaking about what is happening now, it is, of course, the result of yet another gamble by the Kiev regime and its Western handlers, who set out to inflict another strategic defeat on Russia, this time, as is well known, within 40 days using massive missile and UAV strikes against our civilian infrastructure and logistics. Their publicly declared goal was the destruction of entire sectors of our country's economy, undermining the unity of our people and the cohesion of Russian society. In short, the goal is to drive Russia to collapse, something they have long dreamed of and constantly speak about. On August 5th, as is well known, that 40-day time frame expired. And so the question arises, what is the result? Of course, strikes on civilian, virtually defenseless targets, and most importantly on civilians themselves, cause economic damage to our country and lead to losses. And the loss of every single person, I want to emphasize this, is always a tragedy for the family, for loved ones, and for the entire country. We know full well that the Nazis of the Great Patriotic War and World War II and the neo-Nazis today derived, and by all appearances continue to derive, a particular satisfaction, a pleasure, from committing such crimes. And we see that these crimes persist. Yet in the end, the ultimate result for the enemy turned out to be the exact opposite of what they expected. Naturally, no turning point in the confrontation with Russia could have occurred, nor has it occurred. The Kiev regime and its masters cannot gain any advantage, have not gained any, and never will. Furthermore, in response to this obvious escalation, and it is an obvious escalation, rooted not in an objective analysis of the battlefield situation or the state of Ukrainian society and state and economy, which is riddled with corruption, but rather driven by PR and ambition. In responding to this gamble, we stepped up our strikes, precisely as you just mentioned. We escalated strikes against Ukraine's defense industry enterprises, including those in Kiev. And we began responding to the enemy's actions against our civilian, industrial, and logistical facilities. The Kiev regime set out to damage our economy. What did it accomplish? It opened Pandora's box itself. Well then, prepare to take the blow right where your economy is most vulnerable. Sectors that, frankly, were already on their last legs anyway. This, by the way, applies to agricultural production as well, export revenues from which serve as the primary source of income for the Kiev regime. Furthermore, you want to disrupt our logistics? Is a question we might pose to the enemy. Well then, retaliatory measures will not be long in coming. Here it comes. Meanwhile, the actions of the Russian military are, of course, far more painful and far more destructive. As I have said time and again, there will always be a response. Most importantly, the enemy's actions have had no bearing on the situation at the front. What is more, our troops are not only maintaining their offensive across all sectors, but have actually accelerated their forward momentum. The armed forces of Russia are confidently carrying out their tasks to fully achieve the goals of the special military operation. Of course, alongside this, we must and will continue to refine our air defense system and expand its capabilities. We need to improve coordination among security and civilian agencies at every level, as well as leverage the capabilities of state-owned enterprises and private business. This is especially vital ahead of the elections to the State Duma and other government bodies. The enemy is trying to intimidate us and disrupt the elections. We will not allow them to do so. I am confident that this attempt at an information psychological assault on Russian society is likewise doomed to fail. We will undoubtedly continue to strengthen Russian statehood and the legitimacy of our government. At the same time, Russia's response to the Kiev regime's latest provocation is, by all appearances, proving quite painful for them, leading to severe consequences and pushing the situation in a number of critical sectors to a breaking point. That is precisely why the Kiev authorities are currently attempting, through intermediaries whose views we certainly respect, to find an exit from the situation they have found themselves in, a situation I must emphasize they brought upon themselves. The Kiev regime is trying to prevent this situation from developing catastrophically, and such trends, by all appearances, are becoming visible. At the same time, the proposals being brought to our attention are at times, I would say, somewhat exotic and remain unacceptable. We are always ready for a dialogue on peace, but only on the basis of the realities taking shape on the ground.
I cannot help but ask, what sort of exotic proposals are these?
You know, I would prefer not to get into details or dwell on specifics right now, because this is a kind of reconnaissance across various potential avenues for agreements. They have sounded more or less similar before, but now under these circumstances, they are being presented in their own way. However, running ahead of ourselves in discussing what might form the basis of eventual agreements is still premature.
Following the Russian strikes on ports, we occasionally hear rather hysterical statements from Ukrainian officials, including at the UN, claiming that the world could be on the brink of famine because grain deliveries have been paralyzed, and naturally they blame us for this.
I have already said that the Kiev authorities let the genie out of the bottle themselves. They started striking our civilian facilities and publicly declared their goal of destroying the Russian economy. Well then, as I just said, take the hit in response. As for agriculture, I also touched on that just now. Exporting these commodities is one of the primary revenue streams for the Ukrainian export economy. Regarding global issues, hardly anything will change. Because first of all, we possess substantial export potential. Just yesterday, the Minister of Agriculture reported to me that it stands at no less than 60 million tons. That is a very solid foundation. Yes, we also face issues related to exporting our goods, but we will resolve these issues, which means there will be no shortage on the global market.